So, you've got an empire to bring down in your fantasy plot. But how do you build a rebellion that actually offers sufficient resistance to really wreck the holders of the levers of power? How do you smash through the army and the nobility and reach the emperor? Do you need an external invasion? A mage who smashes through city walls? No. Here's the secret. Most real-world empires collapse because they couldn't hold themselves together under pressure. They fell apart due to internal dissent. And today, we're going to dive deep into 3 rebellions that rewrote history. And more importantly, we'll break down how you can use these examples to build rebellions and revolutions that transform your fantasy empires. We'll cover the rise of the Yellow Turbans in China, the dramatic end of France's monarchy and the revolution, and the Vietnamese revolt of Lai Bi against China's Liang dynasty. And in the process, I'll show you how to make a rebellion against an empire feel like it can and should win. Welcome to another episode of Just-in-Time World Building with your host, Marie Mullaney. The first thing we'll talk about is seeds of success layin in failure. Rebellion is hard. The official government controls the army, the elite, the money, basically all the levers of power. A rebellion needs a lot more than a plucky group of adventurers to make a dent in the monstrosity that is an empire. However, sometimes the defeat of a rebellion can lay the seeds for the death of an empire nonetheless. Take the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a peasant-led uprising in late Han China. It was crushed, absolutely, but it destabilized the Han so badly that within a few decades the dynasty collapsed entirely. The rebellion didn't end the empire, but it doomed it. So let's explore that a little deeper. It's 2nd century China. The Han dynasty has ruled for centuries. Culturally, it's a golden age. But politically, it's rotting. Land is concentrated in the hands of rich landlords. Peasants are crushed by debt and taxation. The imperial court is paralyzed by eunuchs, infighting, and corruption. Now, add in famine, plague, and floods. The people are starving, but the elites are still building villas. It's your classic let them eat cake moment. Enter Zhang Ju, a healer and mystic who preached a new Taoist-infused religion called the Way of Great Peace. His teachings promised a cosmic realignment, a heavenly mandate that would sweep away the old world and bring harmony. To the ruling classes, he was a heretic, but to the starving masses, he was a prophet, and they rallied behind him. In 184 CE, Zhang and his followers launched a coordinated rebellion across the empire, hundreds of thousands, all wearing yellow turbans as a sign of their cause. The movement wasn't just military, it was spiritual, social, and economic. Zhang wasn't offering power, he was offering meaning, a way out of the broken system. And that's an important takeaway for a fantasy writer. Give your rebels a world view, not just a grievance. The Yellow Turbans weren't just angry with the state of the world. They believed they were building a new one. That makes for compelling storytelling. Also, building a new world makes a rebellion spread like a meme and brings rebels flocking to the banners of the rebel leaders, especially if it's an idea that can be communicated simply and can mean different things to different people. See my video on the aftermath of revolutions for more on this topic. And speaking of the aftermath, the Yellow Turbans were eventually crushed, as I said, but the military effort to do so drained the treasury and empowered local warlords who stopped listening to the central government, and within decades, the Han dynasty was shattered. And that's another lesson to learn. Sometimes the first rebellion fails so that the second one can succeed. And you can use that first rebellion as part of the lore of your world, inspiring your rebels to try again, but different this time. But sometimes a rebellion can absolutely succeed from jump. And most often, that happens when you don't just have peasants being revolting, but the elites are right there with them. So, let's explore that next. Sometimes a rebellion doesn't have to claw its way up from the gutters. Sometimes it kicks off with a sword in one hand and a noble's signet ring in the other. And when rebellion isn't just peasants in rags, when it includes generals, aristocrats, and high-ranking officials, suddenly it's not a fringe movement, it's a political crisis. The gates aren't just being stormed, they're being opened from the inside. And few instances in history illustrate this better than the French Revolution. Let's set the stage. By the late 1780s, the Kingdom of France was on the brink of toppling. It was a top-heavy society with a hollowed-out core. The first estate, the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility, were exempt from most taxes, while the third estate, everybody else, paid the bill. Decades of war, reckless royal spending, and a series of bad harvests had the economy in total shambles. Bread prices skyrocketed. People were starving. The crown tried to fix it by taxing the nobles. The nobles refused. Cue chaos. The Estates General was summoned in 1789, supposedly to find a solution. Instead, it became a political battleground. And here's where things really got interesting. The French Revolution didn't start in the streets. It started in the halls of power when the members of the Third Estate, those couple of peasants allowed in there, joined by some liberal nobles and radical clergy, declared themselves the National Assembly, seizing legislative power in defiance of the autocratic king. And one of those nobles who seized power was Marquis de Lafayette, whose life is a fascinating story. Lafayette wasn't just any noble. He was a French aristocrat and military hero, a veteran of the American Revolutionary War, where he fought alongside George Washington. When the revolution began in France, Lafayette sided with the people. He drafted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, and helped form the National Guard, and even tried to act as a mediator between the monarchy and the revolutionary movement. He wasn't a total radical. He wanted a constitutional monarchy, not the guillotine. But his involvement gave the revolution legitimacy, military credibility, and political cover. He's a perfect example of how elite defectors can make or break a rebellion. And that's a great lesson to learn as a fantasy world builder. Elite defection is a force multiplier. When a general or noble defects, they often bring troops, money, and knowledge to the inner workings of the regime. But their motives are rarely pure. Some elites genuinely do believe in reform. Lafayette appears to be one of those from history. Others see the writing on the wall and switch sides to save themselves. And these two nobles will have very different perspectives on what should happen after a rebellion. And that's an important point. These characters can be tragic, ambiguous, or even manipulative. Lafayette, for instance, tried to steer the revolution towards moderation, and ended up hated by both sides, of course. In a rebellion, elites can slow down the radical wing, or be accused of betrayal by former allies, or become tragic figures crushed by the revolution they helped unleash, or all of the above. But the simple fact is, rebellion becomes much more dangerous to the ruler when the elite class turns on itself. A civil war of ideology is much more volatile than one of class warfare alone. A crown prince who joins the revolution brings legitimacy. A general with doubts about his king might open the city gates. A noble who funds the rebellion in secret might be looking for profit after the fact. Think in terms of fractured loyalties. Let some elites stay loyal, others defect, and some try to play both sides. And that's where your real tension lies. And don't forget, elite betrayal won't save the rebels from bloodshed. Lafayette survived the American Revolution, but in France he was branded a traitor, imprisoned, and exiled. In revolutions, even your heroes can get burned. Before we get into the rebirth of a nation, give me one moment to invite you to join the channel of Just-in-Time Worldbuilding. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you get early access to videos and access to worksheets to track your world with. And you also get access to members-only live streams. So, if you're interested in supporting the channel, look for the join button right next to the subscribe button and become a Just-in-Timer today. And now, let's talk about one more ingredient to rebellion. The spark created by identity and the desire of a people to be free. Now, I've been saying that rebellions need an idea people can rally behind. The French Revolution had freedom, brotherhood, and equality. The Yellow Turbans had their promise of harmony. But honestly, in the case of rebelling against an empire, the most powerful idea is simply freedom, or the rebirth of a nation that was captured by the empire. And a great demonstration of that is the Vietnamese rebellion against China in the 6th century. Let's explore that a little deeper. In 541 CE, northern Vietnam, then known as Giai was a Chinese frontier province under the Liang dynasty. It had been under Chinese control for centuries, alternating between brutality and benign neglect, depending on the emperor and the bureaucracy. But culturally, Vietnam wasn't China. Its people had their own traditions, dynasties, and sense of identity. And into the scene came Lai Bi, a Vietnamese aristocrat from a noble family, trained in both Chinese and native traditions. In the 530s, the Liang court grew ever more corrupt. Taxes increased. Local officials abused their power. And when the governor of Giai Vietnam, died, the Liang court tried to install another puppet. But instead, Lai Bi rebelled. With a small trained army, he won the Battle of Hepu in 544 and drove the Liang out of his territory, and he was declared Emperor of Nam Viet, the first truly independent Vietnamese empire in centuries. So I will caveat his victory, though. China was very distracted by near constant civil unrest during this time period of his rebellion. If you're a little province and you're going to declare independence from a giant empire, waiting for civil unrest in the bulk of the empire is a really good strategy. And I speak from personal knowledge since I'm Finnish, and we very strategically waited for 1917 before declaring independence from the Russian Empire. They were a little busy with other things to worry about a breakaway province at that time. Yeah, know what I mean? Anyway, there is more of a lesson than waiting for the right moment to declare your independence. The first important element is rebellions can be about identity. Rebellions don't just ask who rules, but can also ask who are we? Finland wouldn't have declared independence if they thought of themselves as Russian. The Vietnamese wouldn't have rebelled if they thought of themselves as Chinese. Root your rebellion in identity, and you have a winning strategy. Secondly, use frontier provinces or client kingdoms as seeds of rebellion. Often the first to break away from an empire are those client provinces, especially during times of civil unrest. And thirdly, make your rebel leader a hybrid figure. Lai Bi understood the imperial system and his native people. That duality makes for a compelling character and, more importantly, helped him understand how and where to strike. And speaking of Lai Bi, I should mention his rule was pretty short. He was killed a few years later. But his revolt succeeded. Vietnam remained de facto independent for centuries after his death. The rebel leader doesn't need to survive to win. A rebellion just needs to break the illusion of imperial permanence. All right, so let's bring all of that together. How do you build an effective rebellion against a fantasy empire? 1. Start with pressure points. Ask, who is being taxed unfairly? Who is being erased culturally or religiously? Who has power but no voice? Even in a magical kingdom, people get hungry, faith gets twisted, cultures collide. 2. Design rebel factions with conflicting goals. Think beyond a single resistance. Your rebellion might include radicals who want to burn it all down, conservatives who want to return to the good old days, opportunists who smell a power vacuum, outsiders who want independence. Conflict within a rebellion is drama gold and extremely realistic. Remember, the empire holds the levers of power. To defeat them requires a big tent, and not everyone in that tent is a natural ally. 3. Escalate your rebellion slowly and believably. Use this arc of rebellion. Discontent leads to organization. Eventually, there's a spark which ignites the main events, which can either be suppressed or succeed, leading to fallout. And then the rebellion can go dormant or can continue. Think of rebellions as a long arc, not a one-off event. 4. Remember, most rebellions fail. It's hard to rebel. The empire holds the levers of power. But sometimes one rebellion's failure is the stepping stone of another rebellion. For a rebellion to succeed, the empire needs to be weakened. Empires don't fall because of monsters or because of war. They're birthed in those fires. No. Empires fall because they rot from greed, from injustice, from the lies they tell to hold power. As I discussed in my video on the end of empire and the importance of social cohesion. So if you're writing about rebellion in your world building, embrace imperial rot, lean into it, make the empire ready to fall, and give your readers rebellions that feel earned. that grow from real grievances, personal betrayals, cultural tensions, or spiritual longing. Build factions that argue, leaders that contradict each other, a world that shifts when power breaks. Because rebellion isn't just an explosion, it's a transformation, it's a systemic change. And stories that transform are the ones we remember. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your favorite band of ragtag rebels. And if you've got thoughts on rebellions, drop them in the comments. As always, a huge thank you to my channel members, especially the just-in-timers of the Stone tier, Jeff Hicks, Epic, Laura Bones 79, A. Walyard, Neil Buckley, Necromancer JM, Katie Kofimug, and Tony Lamanna, along with the Wood tier and the Straw tier. Your help allows me to keep making these videos, and I am very, very grateful. If you would like a free way to support the channel right now, you can simply watch another video. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like my video on how to pull off a political coup, which you can check out on the screen right now. Or you can follow whatever the algorithm is recommending for you. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World Building.